Welcome to SEC Football Live here from 440 Sports, and brought to you, of course, by ML Rose, Nashville's craft beer and burger joint. 6 locations all over the mid-state area. You can get to those in any neighborhood you might be in town. If you're coming to visit or if you're living here, we do appreciate you guys for hanging out, and go check out ML Rose. Great stuff. Godfrey, Braden, Gall. Godfrey, good to see you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Hello. Yes. Oh, man, that feels like a month ago.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so today on the show, of course, we've got a SEC championship game we'll glance at and we'll touch on. We've got college football playoff rankings, of course, we'll glance at and touch on. But I want to start with some coaching stuff, and we'll kind of look back at rivalry weekend, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. Just in general, in all senses of the word, I thought rivalry weekend was great. Did the job for me from an entertainment standpoint over a 4-day period of time as a college football fan. So all that stuff to do. If you are in the area, though, Stephen.
Yes.
And you like watching football.
Yes.
Saturdays or Sundays.
Which or Tuesday. We're still on that 5-day. So 7-day a week kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a game. Well, regular season's over, but close to it.
Do you like good beer?
Do you like football? Do you like?
Do you like consuming good beer and eating good burgers and delicious waffle fries and maybe the best ranch in the city? Yes, I'll say that.
That's the
best ranch.
That's a new one on the ad read.
It's my wife's deal. Like, she thinks it is the best ranch. ML Rose has the best ranch dressing, and it's a dipping sauce you get for your waffle fries at ML Rose.
Yeah.
She says it's the best. It is a little thicker, a little creamier than like your soupy sort of like restaurant ranch. It's very good. Homemade. It's delicious. So ML Rose just doing things better than everybody else. They have been in this city for, I want to say, like 15 years now going on. I think they launched in 2008. So maybe 16 years. They now have 6 locations all over the city, and great happy hour specials on Saturdays and Sundays during the early window. I think it's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can get 2-for-1 beers, 2-for-1 bloodies, 2-for-1 bubbles, champagne there, mimosas. You got great brunch menu with the SEC sandwich.
The SEC sandwich.
Doesn't get any better than that. SEC show, SEC football, drinks, SEC sandwich, ML Rose. So go check it out. If you're in town or if you live here, we do appreciate your support, and go check it out. All right, I want to talk to you. Before we get to like the rivalry games that happened, what does it mean? And then we'll look at the rankings and the championship game. But I want to start with the coaching stuff, because this is like a really big time coaching weekend. Black Sunday, of course, on Sunday, a lot of coaching changes happen. Not as many this year, more in the group of 5 level than in the power level. And even the ones that opened in the power level opened for like kind of like begrudgingly or in weird ways. Right. So I want to start, before we talk specifics about names or impact on SEC programs or coordinator hires or any of that stuff. Like, I don't want to talk about that necessarily. I want to discuss the dynamics of a coaching decision in general, from both the coach's perspective, but also from the school's perspective. Okay. I have long called, some people call them blue bloods or, power programs or whatever. Like, there's a lot of cliches for it. I always ask the question a little differently. It's who has national championship DNA. And for the better part of 100 years, it was about geography, being close to talent within a 6-hour radius, and resources, right? Those resources sometimes were paying players under the table. Sometimes those resources were building waterfalls or hiring coaches or, buying out coaches, whatever. A lot of times, national championship DNA for me and then that's how I would evaluate a program and a job opening. So you could look at Kentucky or Mississippi State, and you could say very simply, while they do have access to players, they don't have as many resources. It's a harder sell to bring talent there, and there's no proof of concept over a long period of time that that's what they have. Texas A&M, hypothetically, has always had a ton of this national title DNA, and for whatever reason, has not been able to get out of its own way. There's a lot of programs in the SEC, probably at least 8 of them, if not 9, that have this national title DNA. That is how I would have evaluated programs and jobs for the better part of my life. I was born in 1982, and for the better part of my career.
Okay.
I don't know if that's still the case anymore on how to evaluate jobs. So I wanted to ask you, how do you evaluate job openings? And you can spin this forward if you want to say hypothetically, let's just say chaos happens next year in the SEC, and you've got Kentucky and Auburn and LSU and Oklahoma, and they're all open. How do we look at those jobs now differently in the modern era than we did 10 years ago?
That's a lot.
I know. Let's go.
We are not sure to be like anyone who tells you that this job is a premier job because of these reasons is not being entirely truthful right now, because behind closed doors, I'll give you a great example. Today is sort of signing. It's early signing day, right?
Sure.
It's ongoing right now. You can have. I could come out and say, "Hey, the new difference is a difference. It's NIL. You need to be raising NIL. You need to be spending money. You need to be building a payroll." The trick of that is, what if you're in a conference where you're really dedicated to NIL, but so are 9 other programs who can raise more money than you, or 10 or 12 other programs. This is how it relates to the SEC specifically. And it's kind of how it ties into the playoff as well. So you can be really dedicated to raising $10 million, $12 million. The problem is that there's probably 10 other schools that are going to be right neck and neck with you. This is why the SEC wants more guaranteed bids to the postseason, because there's a financial competition at stake. There's also the other issue is there might now be an outlier class that has nothing to do with history, with enrollment, alumni, population size, geography, any of that.
UCF.
No, UCF benefits from almost all those.
Oh, okay.
They have a huge enrollment. They have great geography. I'm talking about, like, you could take a program. So Michigan has sort of bumbled and stumbled through the better part of the modern era. They've not had a great modern era. If you define it as like 92 on the Lloyd Carr, there's 96. Then there's a depreciation by their own definition. They go through the Rich Rod saga, and they finally win this national title last year after a lot of sort of internal soul searching. Well, what's going on this year? They are pulling a 5-star quarterback away from LSU because of NIL. They are aggressively working their donor class, who is it's kind of the 1%, idea in economics and politics. And now Michigan looks like a beast in at least in this temporary space that we have before we know what the House settlement's going to be. We know what NIL is. So some of the older powers look great positioned for the next 5 years. Some of the older powers look old. I think if I were to hand you a sheet of paper with the head coaching jobs that are currently open on Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, and it was 5 years.
North Carolina, West Virginia, UCF, and Purdue. Let's stick with those 4.
Okay, well, there's like way more open than that. But
right, yeah. but I'm talking.
You would look and say, okay, North Carolina is the best job. It's probably not. They have a huge issue with NIL. There is a ideological concern, and I've talked about this on other shows. I've talked about this on here, where you're either in on the idea of funding personnel in football or you're not. And if you say you are, you have to follow through and show it. And North Carolina's culture is different. They value, and this is not a judgment one way or the other, they value women's soccer, and they value lacrosse, and they value a lot of sports, and they carry a lot of sports too. I wrote about this for the Washington Post when they let go of Mac. They carry a lot of sports. So the idea of we need $15 million tomorrow for football players is not going to resonate the same way at North Carolina that it is at Ohio State, that it is at Florida. So that's fine. I'm not passing judgment and saying that's right or wrong, but in this little temporary space that we have, North Carolina is not drawing the level of attention that people thought it would. And it was also that they were historically an on paper good job,
right,
for all of those things that you just said. But now, I'm telling you right now, coaches and agents are not treating that as like an A tier or S tier job.
I guess the reason I said UCF is that they don't have any of the traditional things that in that old way of evaluating programs, the way Auburn and Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia and LSU and these big power, huge SEC programs.
Well, they don't have all those programs you named are about 60 to 80 years older.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. They don't have age. They don't have time. They don't have an alumni base. They are in a great geographic location for players. So half of my national title DNA thing applies to UCF. Mm-hmm. But they
have money too.
But they have shit tons of money.
Yeah, they have money, but they also have a word that you hear a lot this time of year, which is alignment.
Yes. So I want to spin this to the SEC because I do think, and I was hearing this a lot on the recruiting trail going into the season, all summer long. You know, when you're kind of like getting tired of like the same talking points about the season because we need games to show up. I want to. The thing I was hearing a lot was that it's starting to level set back to old recruiting ways. That, you know, if you're, you know, the going rate for a top 100 player is about $100,000, let's call it, roughly speaking, per year. And what's happening is that if you have offers from Ohio State and Michigan, as well as LSU and Alabama and Oklahoma and Texas, that you're probably going to be offered about the same amount of money. But most players, there's occasionally a Quidshot Junkins who's just going to get offered more by Ohio State, right? Or Caleb Downs. And they're going to leave SEC schools or big time programs or whatever it may be. That largely you're going to go back to sort of the old school reasons why a player makes a decision, right? Which is relationship with coaches, scheme fit, geography, family ties, like all these other old things that we talk about that sort of led to a lot of recruiting decisions. And I was hearing from a lot of different folks from a lot of different areas of the country, including the South, that it was kind of going back to that for most players. Maybe not a 5-star quarterback, maybe not a Caleb Downs type who's not a recruit, but that for most players, it was kind of going back to, all right, well, $22,000 isn't more than $20,000 if the scheme and the geography are terrible, right? So I'm curious about the SEC in your opinion. Do you think we have level set from a resource standpoint in terms of the dynamics you're talking about, in terms of the top tier in the conference? When you look at national title programs in the SEC, it is Auburn, Alabama. It's Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Georgia, LSU, Florida. They are all ones that have won national titles, have unlimited resources, and have really good access to players. They have had varying degrees of speed with which they have adopted NIL. But do you think it's level setting at all?
Not yet, no, because we have another wave coming. We have the House settlement that is yet to be finalized and then synthesized by athletic departments and these new GM roles. So this is why I keep trying to hold my hands up when people are developing theories and developing a hypothesis, because we don't have the data yet. The rich will survive. And that's why I think a lot of people are expecting seismic change in college football. Seismic change rarely happens. And when usually when you're talking about a power falling off for 10, 20, 30 years or something like that, and it could be an SEC school, it could be Big Ten, whatever, it's probably self-inflicted. It's probably a severe amount of mismanagement, or there's, some sort of booster issue or something like that, right? Or I mean, occasionally you just get snake bit by a series of truly bad coaching hires, and then that has a kind of valleying impact.
No great program is immune to bad decision making. Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, they've all had LSU. They've all had major bottoming out of situations. Decades of that, actually.
But I think the interesting thing is going to be this idea that, just because you're an SEC school, just because you're a Big Ten school, or because you're not, it means X. We're not there yet. We don't know. There's going to be a really interesting study in how many schools can stay attractive to West Coast players. West Coast players so far have stayed pretty. California has seen a depreciation. Arizona has seen an increase. Colorado has seen an increase, but we're seeing money move away because of conference realignment. And so, you can only sign so many kids at USC and Oregon, and maybe Washington underneath that. It's
Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State is begging for people to pay his players.
Yeah, and it's working. I mean, they're in the Big 12 championship. I wrote about him this week at the Post, and his transparency about the process, I think, is going to be an advantage moving forward, that he doesn't sugarcoat it. And this is the reality of the sport. Several key major players in the SEC, be it a transfer like Joe Burrow or, any number of California 5-stars who have come to programs like Alabama or
Tennessee's quarterback,
Tennessee, LSU, et cetera. The idea, I wonder how long that can last, is kind of what I'm getting at. I'm wondering how the market is going to treat. And the other thing too is that we keep hearing from recruiting analysts is that we have almost sort of fully nationalized. And so not only is the concept of a kid leaving the East Coast or the West Coast, or, a kid from Miami going to Oregon, or a kid from Los Angeles going to Alabama, that's not really a big deal anymore. I mean,
there can only be one quarterback on a team.
It doesn't really, that's no longer a big issue. And so we've nationalized, and it's going to, I think it's going to suck up into the same big brands who can survive. But once you get to that second tier, I think there's a ton of anxiety, and it's regardless of, we're in the SEC, we're going to be fine. No, because let's say you're Ole Miss and you still want to raise $15 million a year. Ole Miss right now, I just pulled it up. They are 15th in the nation in recruiting this high school class as we speak. And I'm just kind of picking on them at random. There's 7 SEC schools in front of them. Yeah. That's no different than Ole Miss having a great signing class in 2004, right? That's kind of the same story.
Right. And so you're not,
that hasn't changed.
You're also not going to have Jackson Dart in his final season in year 3 under Lane Kiffin, and Walter Nolan available in the portal, and so available in the portal. It also was a bit of a perfect storm for them to try what they did this year. I think it was the right strategy. You just got to beat freaking Kentucky, and you're in the playoff without even breathing hard. But you didn't.
I don't know. It's funny, even with that Kentucky thing, I don't know how far they'd go, because I just think their offense has definitely degraded down the stretch.
Good defenses in the playoff too, across the board. And I don't think Miami gets in, but really good defenses. I think that's one of the themes of the tournament this year. You look
I'm
very good defenses.
We talked about this on Split Zone today, and I keep coming back to it because it keeps working. I think we're going to look back at 2024 and say offensive line explained almost everything.
Yeah.
Almost that, and there's not the stellar transcendent quarterback.
No, but that's the other thing that I think is similar to all these teams. Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, really good, potential good quarterbacks, very good defensive fronts, but not a ton of offense around the quarterback. I think Penn State's the same. I think Ohio State's the same. The questions about these teams are not the defensive front. They are the offensive line and the quarterback and the surrounding cast. I do think that's the same for Alabama and Ole Miss. I think Miami's the wild card here that's different, where they're just elite quarterback, terrible defense. So here's my question then to pivot this forward, where we know we've got some coordinator hires this year in the SEC. They're going to be big, but really it's sort of looking ahead to next year for the SEC. And that is, do you think are we in such a bizarrely stable year in the SEC in the coaching decision world because of some of these changing dynamics, because of the uncertainty with the House settlement, because of this stuff, level setting the NIL dollars and kind of evening it out across the powers that be in the conference? Or is it just a completely coincidental random year where, the guys who came into the season on the hot seat, which would be, Sam Pittman, Billy Napier, Clark Lee, Shane Beamer, Mark Stoops, not hot seat, but those are the 5 that I had circled for that could change. And almost all of them, other than Stoops, dramatically overachieved and answered a lot of questions. And so I wonder if it's just coincidental, or if it's driven by some of the decision making is driven by some of these changing dynamics and uncertainty.
But trying to figure out what's a variable and what's a constant moving forward is going to be what drives a lot of people insane. And in both, I started saying front offices recently, because that's basically what it is. It's like a pro franchise, and the league.
Alabama's got the highest paid general manager in football. That's a front office person.
This is why Greg Sankey has a job to essentially enable his constituency to succeed. So what his job is Greg Sankey, if you asked him to or told him to, would argue down to whatever the limit of a playoff is. Meaning, if there were 30 teams getting in the playoff right now, he would argue why Florida should be in. That's the truth. He's a lobbyist.
That's his job. Yeah.
And so there's no actual genuine, it's not what it's kind of what I get frustrated about, who's better, this, that, and all that. It really, it's all agenda driven. It's all a lobbyist. They're just pulling, they're gonna select things that work. There's gonna be a lot of confirmation bias in place. The anxiety in the SEC right now, and the anxiety it's really more in the South than it is in the North at the moment, because like 4 of the projected first round games would be like outdoors in the cold in the North. The SEC is worried that aspects of its identity and its blueprint and its culture have not translated well. And I think that is what they're going to go into the offseason and look at, because right now, if
fix it right away,
or force the postseason to adapt to them, and they have the influence to do that. So are they going to? They can platform an argument, and they do that incredibly well because of their ownership with ESPN, but they can't instantly change policy. So if we go into Sunday, or honestly, I think even if if SEC teams don't fare well in the bracket, there'll be a little bit of internal evaluation in individual programs, but the SEC is going to continue to try and kind of bend the table to, make it roll their way.
Which is totally understandable. I mean, that's what every business does in every walk of life, mostly.
It's understandable, but it's the scorpion parable, and it's still a scorpion. What's the problem is that there's no check on the individual conferences, and so because you have these 2 powerful entities that have grown to the size where they can manipulate media, they can manipulate the postseason format, you're now doing it at the expense of the sport. So what I'm concerned about is a return to the BCS era, in that there will be zero consistency year to year. The rubric will change. The format will change. Something's going. What I believe strongly is that within 24 months, this 12-team playoff format and the rubric will be very, very different in reaction to, we had a year where we kind of leveled off at the top and we didn't have a clear-cut winner. And therefore we're trying, or on it, the real truth is we're just trying to jam home as many programs as we can into this thing.
You want it to be NFL. If you want it to be like parity-driven NFL, every team's got a chance, and we've got the most teams that have a chance, then that's the angle you need to play. That you did not necessarily tie this to coaching decisions. Like Auburn, we know that there's a buyout. They could have made a decision on Hugh Freeze this year. Probably not. It was going to be another third year, so he gets his third year. 5-7 is a clear step back. He's very much on the hot seat going into next year. That's a job that could be open. I don't think Brian Kelly or Brent Venables get fired next year, but those are 2 jobs that are going to be highly watched, and certainly going to be, the agent class is going to be sort of like circling.
I think Venables is. I would disagree. I think Venables is in play next year. I think the Oklahoma OC hire is, it was just finalized, is going to probably be the most impactful non-head coaching move of this 12-month cycle.
All right, we'll go ahead. Well, we can talk through that decision in just a second, but because there's a chance that because of the lack of chaos this year, there's a chance we get like 2 retirements out of Sam Pittman and Mark Stoops. You get a firing out of Hugh Freeze and Brent Venables, and then you get Brian Kelly going to the NFL because he's tired of dealing with this. Lane Kiffin could go to the NFL. I'm just saying, like, you could do. There could be a lot of different ways that we have chaos, right? For next year, Billy Napier could get fired.
I'm laughing at the Brian Kelly NFL press conference.
I know. What the question is, like, where do all those if we're just doing that exercise with the jobs, where do they rank now? If we're looking at Auburn, Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, Arkansas and Kentucky are sort of in that middle class that you talk about, where that's the class that's a little bit more concerned about future budgets, which is South Carolina, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Kentucky, Mississippi State in that category. What happens if we get total chaos and all those jobs are open? How are we evaluating Auburn versus Oklahoma versus LSU versus Florida versus Arkansas?
I can't create a pecking order. What will happen with agents and their clients is that it will be they'll make binary decisions more than likely. Maybe they'll evaluate 3, but it will come down to very specific assurances made to that coach. I think there's also going to be, you're also looking at rosters. Am I walking into a good situation with a quarterback or a line, or is this something where we're going to have to portal heavier? That is very NFL, honestly. Job openings in the NFL are usually measured on, like, do we have a quarterback or not? That's a big like qualifier when you're looking at, because like a lot of people are just like, well, what's the difference if you're going into an NFL job? Like, you're gonna have about the same amount of power. There's a salary cap. There's this, there's that. Well, what's your relationship with ownership? And then what's your roster look like? That's going to kind of inform how we move through the future. Now, there are certain there's certain sort of inarguable comparisons of size. Arkansas is smaller than Georgia, for instance. But again, the gray area is going to get muddier and muddier and muddier. So a candidate is going to either have a relationship in that area. It's going to be based on, I think some recruiting ties. That's still that's still important. It's still a personnel driven business. And then after that, I think it's going to be a commitment to, as well as a management of NIL. We haven't talked about the management of NIL a whole lot, because I don't think the average person in our industry understands yet the science behind managing NIL, because this is a book being written in progress.
So managing NIL is a front office, the way an NFL front office executive has to manage free agency, contract extensions, the NFL draft, coaching salary. Like it's sort of every piece of the. Is that what you're talking about? Is, hey, we've got to make sure, A, we're going to get so-and-so out of the portal. B, we're going to try to recruit this class. C, we're trying to make sure we keep Quinshon Judkins. Like we're doing the whole deal here on, and that's what you're saying from management standpoint, is all the different ways the NIL money needs to be dispersed, right?
Yeah, but also think about the basic rules. You know, what we know to be a good GM or a bad GM in the pro style or pro side of the game is based on how do you manage the cap, how do you manage contracts, that kind of thing. We're never going to have a cap. We're still skirting this whole labor law mess. So it's a huge problem. And then also, you bring up like Quinshon Judkins. He's not alone, but we'll pick on him for a second.
I'm not even picking on him. Just,
you can go and ask for NIL as many times as you want to. No one likes Mike Gundy, myself included, but he wasn't wrong when he said the system is where, like, we've told guys, hey, stop coming, stop asking. We're done with this. It is what it is. There's a major problem right now in that the system is totally unregulated. There's no CBA.
Sounds a lot like
there's no players union.
Sounds a lot like the brown paper bag era.
It's not. It's not entirely different, except market value went up because it's above the table. When when you decriminalize an industry, someone's going to get rich.
Well, it's also I would argue that, like, because you could decriminalize weed right now and it would actually reduce prices. I would say it's because TV contracts.
Yeah, but a lot of other people would make money off of legalized weed.
True. I don't know. I can get 1,000 milligrams at my local liquor store for like $16. Not that I know. I've never done that before.
Would like the FDA to start. It would be nice if the FDA was involved in that.
Oh, it was legal. It's completely legalized. It's been totally.
But it's not through the Fed. It's not through a federal.
Oh,
there's no oversight. There's no regulation. Like if you eat a bad Pop-Tart, there's recompense for that. There's a process. It
never happened. Anyway, it's going to be total chaos next year in the conference. I'm predicting that from a coaching standpoint, and it's going to be a bunch of surprises that everyone can circle the retirements and everyone can circle the hot seat with Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze. I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more coming that we don't realize. Quickly on Oklahoma here, very interesting finish to their season, of course. But Ben Arbuckle, who is Ben Arbuckle? What is he? 29 years old.
We have seen. So I wrote a piece on Dillingham 2 days ago, and now he's not the youngest head coach. We're seeing a youth movement, is what I was trying to get at, because the new FAU head coach is now 33. Ben Arbuckle is not 30. I think he's 29, as you said. If you watch all of college football, this is where I always encourage SEC fans to get out of your comfort zone. There has been a kind of a fascinating carousel or tree or breeding ground for the last couple of years at Western Kentucky of coordinators bringing in systems from lower tiers of football, everything from FCS to D2 to whatever, usually sort of, I'm going to be really generic here and say like pass aggressive, innovative, high scoring.
Does Joe Brady count as like one of the originals in the SEC?
No, the only reason I would say not is that his was very pro, informed, which is why he went back to the pros.
Right.
The Ben Arbuckle was at Western Kentucky up until he went to Washington State. Washington State has also hired more than one Western Kentucky assistant, I believe, over this. This is also how Cam Ward gets from Incarnate Word. There was an Incarnate Word is a big piece of this. Incarnate Word, if you don't know, is a Catholic college in the FCS in Texas, in San Antonio, and they have had multiple record-setting years where they're scoring like 70 a game on average. And so those offensive coordinators, G.J. Kinney came from there, the Texas State head coach. Several coaches have come through. This is also a guy like Eric Morris, who's the head coach at North Texas now. So Arbuckle is one of these guys. This is the third generation. If you really wanted to make a big tree, Braden, with a lot of branches that starts with Hal Mummy and Mike Leach, and you go all the way down through all this sort of like this is a second cousin in that world of offense. Arbuckle's a Texas guy. He played like small ball. Like I think I pulled it up his bio. West Texas A&M.
Houston Baptist, I thought.
He was an OC at Houston Baptist.
Houston Baptist.
So Houston Baptist is another one of these schools like Incarnate Word.
Yep.
And so they've developed, they for whatever reason, I've kind of laughed with people about it. Western Kentucky jumps on these guys. Washington State jumps on these guys. And then they come in a year. This starts really in the transfer portal. So going back to like what, 19? When you can bring a quarterback with you as a coordinator, this process, these guys are like, yeah, I'm coming in. I'm bringing this guy. I might have a receiver. I might know a guy in a JUCO who can give me a receiver that knows this system. And what you're seeing is sort of that mentality of like add water, instant results.
Do you like it then in this case?
It's funny. It's very,
it doesn't feel Oklahoma-y.
No, that's what I was about to say the opposite. I feel like they've gone back and what they're trying to do is find.
Oh, it's like old Josh Heupel kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, if you think about the inflection point of Oklahoma football, to me, Stoops returns them to national prominence. They are a ruddy team schematically. It's everything a defensive coordinator wants it to be until Stoops has to face reality and he starts hiring Josh Heupel. That
was the Sam Bradford teams, right? Like 08, 09.
Riley, yeah. And they start understanding like, all right, we're just gonna have to win 8 possessions to 7 or 10 possessions to 9, and these games are gonna be 49-38 or whatever. But as long as we're 2 possessions better and we're gonna be ripping and running, the personnel's not fitting this anymore. We can't find the big bodies on defense, and everybody's spread out. If we're gonna play basketball on grass, well, let's play the best basketball. And that was Oklahoma's. That was kind of the way they owned the Big 12, while Texas was very much
old school,
much more in an existential crisis with the later Mac years and Charlie trying to do different things. Yep. Bob kind of just did that. We did it with multiple sets of coordinators and groupings, and they look different a little bit. Like
will Georgia ever do this at any point in their entire existence?
No, you have to be made to. You have to be made to, and this was like the whole thing where we read the comments and we were doing all that about Georgia.
So Texas will make them evolve this weekend when Texas beats them by dominating the line of scrimmage?
No, because I think the funny thing is that if you play that theory out, I think the way Texas wins the game is is a way in which Kirby goes, damn, we should double our efforts. Yeah, because I don't think Texas is going to win like a 53-point kind of deal. Like, I think if anything, if you are applying there, and we've learned not to do this, but we're about to do it. If you apply the A&M game to Georgia, it's going to be big and smashy.
No, their win over, and because I went to high school, I went to middle school and then high school for 1 year in Austin, and because I also lived in Dallas, I just have Texas in my blood the way you kind of have Louisiana, Mississippi, and Atlanta and Georgia in your blood. The Texas win over A&M was. It was one of the most Texas performances, and I don't mean university of, I mean state of Texas. It was one of the most Texas ways, old school Texas way of winning a football game, which is we are going to dominate the line of scrimmage. We're going to force you to throw the football, make mistakes. We're going to hold you to 0 offensive points, and we are going to run the football with a backup left tackle and a 5th string running back down your throat. And the only way you're going to get back in this game is a special teams mistake and a bizarro deflected pass. And that's it. That's the only way y'all are going to get back in this game. The atmosphere, by the way, the atmosphere was spectacular. Love to see the crowd. Love to see A&M and Texas back on the same field again, all that stuff. I do think there's an interesting commentary, and this is now we're kind of moving forward. You can tell me what you think about the Arbuckle hire if you want to interject that at some point. But
I just say I'll wrap it up real fast. I think it's interesting. I think it's inspired. I think Venables holds a lot of he holds a lot of esteem for Stoops, and he wants to sort of bring that mentality back to that program. There's a definite risk associated with this because I haven't seen the system applied to this personnel against these defenses.
Yeah,
hang on, I want to be really clear here, but wrap it up. We did say the same thing about Josh Heupel. Most of us did.
True.
So I would definitely leave it in the gray and say there's potential to go both ways here. But I really do want to state this is the most important coordinator hire made in the SEC.
No, I totally agree. What's interesting about the Heupel commentary in comparison is we said the same thing about Heupel. We did not, and the thing I remember, I'll just speak for myself. The thing that I remember saying is I don't know if he can recruit on defense to match up with his offense to build the holistic program.
Correct.
That's what he's done. Like he has recruited elite defensive linemen for like 5 years now, and it's why they're in the playoff.
Not and that's kind of the
that's very much it's very much Venables. It's very much
Venables. and that was sort of the Bob Stoops logic of like, well, Bob was always one of the greatest DCs in the game. So if we evolve on offense and we have to go tempo, Bob as a program manager should be able to install a defense that is at least again that possession or two better. I don't think we're going back to that style of football, but I think that it can apply in interesting ways. Heupel, I think, kind of inspires decisions like these in the SEC. He's the last one in where people were really like, that ain't going to work in the Southeastern. And it's like, it did. So I can't think of one more recent than Heupel that was met with more incredulity.
From an offensive scheme standpoint.
No, because everyone else is Sabanized
because like Eli's not really like he's not really from that tree. Okay, no, I think you're right.
Eli's. I mean, Eli. I think if anything, people thought he'd be more Gus than he is.
Right, and then there's there was incredulity about Shane Beamer, but for totally different reasons.
Not those reasons.
All right, so I want to quickly the Texas thing here. Here's a great comment by Andrew. I'm most interested to see these advanced offenses versus Big Ten teams in the playoffs. I would even zoom back out even from that. I can't wait to see these sort of offenses against what looks like a very deep collection of high quality defenses across the country. We're going to see an Ohio State defense against the Josh Heupel offense. We're going to see potentially a Kalen DeBoer offense against a Penn State defense. Like we're going to see fill in the blank offense against Notre Dame's defense. Like we're going to see a lot of these comparisons kind of come to life in this tournament, which I think is going to be very fun because I think the one thing that all these teams have in common is a great defense and a pretty good quarterback, but we're not really sure. Quickly to Texas and A&M. I think it is fascinating that Texas A&M has spent 13 years building its identity separate from Texas in a conference that it knows was better, that it was, thumbing its nose down, like looking down its nose at Texas and all this stuff. And I believe in Elko, great coach. I think they're going to be fine. I think the program's in good shape. Great first season, clear my throat, right? But for Texas to come in year one in the conference with a quarterback who, much like these other quarterbacks, Nico and all these other guys, has these moments of like, just like, what are you doing, dude? Like also moments of brilliance, but also just clear moments where it's obvious that you're not the elite Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson kind of guy. You're just a pretty good player. And he's just a pretty good player. That's been the case for him for his whole career at Texas. And for them to do this in year one on the road and to do it in totally dominating fashion in a very old school Texas Big 12 state of Texas kind of way, I do find that to be a hilarious narrative that has been built around this. It's not an indictment of A&M at all because of they fired a coach last year. So like it's not really an indictment of A&M. I just think it's a fascinating storyline looking at the conference and looking at Texas and A&M. I just think it's fascinating.
I would look at it less as year one. I know it's their first year in the Southeastern Conference, but we are talking about a college football playoff team from last year. And I really think you start the clock, to be totally honest, the moment that let's say Texas Brain Trust, we'll call them. So it's a little bit of the actual people in charge in name and title. And then the people with the check writing ability got together before that Sugar Bowl year and said, we need to get rid of Tom Herman. We're going to, by the way, we're going to the SEC. We know that because they spoke to the SEC and ESPN long before that stuff came public. And they said, we need to have a staff, a head coach, a recruiting and personnel philosophy that matches the SEC. That's how Sark got the job. And that's really, I think, kind of when the clock started ticking. They had
I don't, you may know all this, but what I was told was that Chris Del Conte was going to bring back Tom Herman, and a gentleman by the name of Kevin Eltief, who is the top decision maker of the University of Texas system, said that ain't happening. We're moving to the SEC, and he got the checks that you're talking about to come. But he was the unified voice that eliminated all the other cooks in the kitchen because that was the problem in Texas, was the cooks in the kitchen, and not enough alignment, as you say, and that was sort of ultimately the decision. They move on Herman, they bring in Sark. The rest is history.
Yeah, I would say that's yeah. I don't want to parse. I don't want to parse through that specifically. Yeah, more or less for now. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. You know, it's funny. Just if I wanted to have a mea culpa, you know, I didn't think Sark was the right person for the job. But one of the I'll put it this way: when Sark was in career, you know, re-education in Tuscaloosa, he obviously took a lot of notes. I also do think that Texas as a, again, front office, evolved and got really, really serious about sort of weeding out country club tendencies for the first time, because like I talked to multiple people on Herman's staff while he was there and after, and they just said, like, you know, our boosters and our culture were the worst problem, because we know ultimately we want the Sabanization of flattening out the highs and lows, being consistent, you know, and getting all the noise out of the channel. But Austin, Texas, and Texas boosters were notorious for getting involved with the kids and being in practice, you know, all the things you don't want. And so they changed that simultaneous to bringing in Sark. They were patient, but you go back and look at that. Oh, what year is it? The sort of the year you kind of describe it now as a controlled burn, where they have the
Sark's first year.
The Bo Davis was right spiel that I talk about all the time. I think it's 21. They got smoked. Yeah, I want to say it's 21 because they got smoked by like Iowa State or something. And yeah, they got smoked. So, okay, I remember. I think you can still find this on YouTube. It was a very colorful speech that someone turned their iPhone camera on the bus, but you can't see anything. Have you seen this before, Braden?
Yeah.
Okay. This was received poorly in the media and by fans at the time, but anyone in the industry was like, oh, I mean, that guy's like, he's swearing a lot. He's yelling at those kids, but he's totally right, because they lose to like Iowa State 30-7. And it was a very Texas response. Kids are on the bus. They don't really care. They talk about where they're going out that night. And Bo Davis, who, if you don't know, was
fire ass
linchpin enforcer for Saban teams at Alabama. He was at LSU at one point.
He's at LSU now.
Yes. And then he got in a little NCAA. It was a little squirrely with the NCAA. He was at UTSA for a while, whatever. Bo Davis comes on there and basically made them see God in a certain sort of way. And I think that's when the clock starts ticking on Texas and the SEC. It's funny because like my colleagues at the Post kind of, I disagree with the framing. It was like, everyone said Texas wasn't SEC ready. And I was like, anyone who said that coming into this season is an idiot. Because like coming into the camps and fall and talking season, we're like, okay, dominant defense, obviously what? Over talented at the quarterback position. Like what are you talking about?
Like elite line of scrimmage play on both sides of the ball, a fantastic offensive guru, two high level quarterbacks, recruiting out the ass, paying players gazillion dollars. Like they were SEC. They were SEC-ification for a long time. Yeah, no, I agree. But the mea culpa, I agree with you, is like I did not also think Sark was going to be capable of this, but I also think we should not be surprised that he's the kind of guy, brilliant offensive mind with a Saban rehabilitation background. Like we kind of should have seen that coming, maybe. And I agree. I did not expect it to be this good.
It wasn't on field. It was. I'm not even alluding to his problems with alcoholism. I'm saying it was managing the Texas apparatus.
Right.
That's the thing where I was like, Sark can't do that.
Right, exactly. It's going to burn him down, and he's going to end up, making a personal mistake or whatever. Yeah,
but really, I mean, I think what they've done is install a firewall, so to speak, with all the booster nonsense. And I mean, by the way, we're like kind of picking on Texas to a degree here, but like this problem persists. I mean, by the way, go to Baton Rouge right now.
LSU, yeah.
Baton Rouge is not in a good space.
Tennessee had this problem.
It killed 20 years of Tennessee football.
Right.
20 years of Tennessee football.
And the one thing that makes Georgia different through all these different iterations of the sport is, and I talked to somebody around the program about this. I said, why is Georgia a little bit more chill? Why is Georgia more aligned? What is it? And the fan base this is what they told me. You can react as you want. But what I was told was that the fan base has been trained on slower moving decisions, and so they don't go as bananas reactionary. You know how Tennessee's just swinging left and right at wildly. It's like they got a blindfold on swinging at a piñata. Like Tennessee's just like, what's happening here, man? And Georgia, from what I've been told, is like they have been trained from the legislative body down through the academic system, through the athletic department, that we are a cruise ship that turns slowly, and we are going to do it. We are going to do it our way, and you guys are going to be okay with that. And that is the way Georgia has functioned for a very long time. And it does.
Or you can go back to the old ways.
Oh yeah, right. Or we can end up with, Ray Goff.
Tip of the spear. It's the Saban story from 2007. Six. No, it was right after.
7's when he got the job.
No, because it's the 6th cycle and 7 is the first season. And so it was right before the season starts. And he says, we're this bad or whatever. But I think I've told this story in the show before. God knows I tell it all the time, but it's the tip of the spear. And that was related to me colloquially. And I think it's become apocryphal in the idea of like, he didn't actually say those words, but he brings all of these people who think they're the most important man in the room, from Montgomery and from Huntsville and from Birmingham and from whatever. And he says, hi.
He sits them down.
I don't, even with profanity on this show, I probably can't really do it justice, but it's like, this is it. Everything I say goes. There is no infighting. If you are needed, you will be informed as such. And basically, he creates a spear, a tip of the spear being like, sorry, I just hit my own computer. I'm in charge. And there will not be any more of this sort of feudal territorial fighting. Matt Brown.
Who could do that for Auburn?
Oh, God. Matt, I was going to say, Matt Brown is taking a lot of grief right now, and I think he should. He also did himself a disservice by going out in the media after the firing, but he was really good at not only was he going to wrap recruiting up quickly, but he was like, I'm going to do every booster club. I'm going to go to every town on the map of Texas. But the thing is they all think they're Mac's number one guy. That's the sign of a truly gifted politician. And that's why he was great at that job. The problem was
make everybody around you feel incredibly important and valued. That's a very good skill. It's a very talented skill. And Texas is doing it right now. All right. So, and I think Andrew's point here, this gets us into the game real fast, because there is a playoff and games happening. We haven't talked about any of that. I think you're beginning to see cracks start to show in the UGA culture. Give it a couple more years. I'm not there yet, but I see why I see why you might think that. I see why he might think that. I think Andrew, you're looking more on field. I think you're starting to see cracks on the field because the rest of the sport is caught up to Georgia, not off the field. Kirby has, I think, complete control over the spear, to continue the analogy.
No
he's got complete control. In fact, that's why he doesn't have to evolve the offense, because he has total control over all of it. All right, so here's the question, though. I do think this is fair about Texas and Georgia. We can spend more time reacting to the game, because I do think Georgia's in. I think they're locked in. We know Texas is in. The winner gets in. There's not a lot of drama in this particular game, other than I think the style of play is going to be very interesting, because I'm curious. I want to see Quinn Ewers take steps. I want to see Georgia and Carson Beck take steps. I want to see progress. I don't know if that's going to happen in this game. I don't think Texas can win the game against Georgia the way they won the game against A&M. I don't think you can do that, which is fairly one-dimensional and just be very conservative. Maybe that does play into their hands, because Georgia likes to do that too. But I'm more interested in the other stuff that's going on around the playoff rankings than I am the actual SEC championship game. I don't, there's not, for the first time, I'm like, okay, maybe the drama is not as big in this particular game, because in the Big Ten and the SEC, the losers should get in no matter what, unless they're a 3 or 4 loss team. And so Georgia's in. They're not going to get in, unless it's a 50-point loss or something, which seems pretty unlikely.
The thing that shocked me the most about the playoff thing on Tuesday was they've kind of killed the suspense for Sunday.
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, because if you're Miami, South Carolina, Ole Miss, you can't move.
Do you buy into the fact that outcomes this weekend could affect resumes? I don't think that they should.
No, because they said they wouldn't. That was the other thing I thought was kind of odd, because they had used this logic before of this is now considered a better win. This is considered a worse win. This is considered a better loss. And I thought, well, all right, that's fine. Whatever you want to say is fine. But how does that not affect? So Georgia lost to 2 of those SEC bubble teams, or whatever,
that's where I was.
Or
if Georgia wins in a dominant fashion, does that make Alabama? Does that make Alabama and Ole Miss's case better?
Yeah, and Florida got better, so did that improve Miami's win over them in week 1? They didn't really get into a lot of that. I was kind of
no, they didn't.
That felt weird.
I did not watch any of it. Just to be clear,
I saw the stats, and then I caught some of the social media stuff.
I don't think Tennessee is worthy of a host game, even though I want to see Neyland Stadium as an alumni. I'd love to see it, but it's not going to happen. I think you got Notre Dame, the loser of the Big Ten game, the loser of the SEC game, especially if the loser of the SEC game is a team that beat you very handily, Georgia. And then I think Ohio State's better. So I think Tennessee is not. I don't think they're going to be better than 9th. And I think they're going to go on the road as an 8-9 matchup. And your reward for playing in that game, if you were to win it, would be, of course, to go play Oregon, probably, or Texas potentially.
That feels like how it should be.
Well, but what's weird though is I think it's because the 3 and the 4 push all these other teams down. That's what's weird about it, is that you actually are hurting. This is what's weird. I figured this out. It's hurting the 1 and the 2 seed. Because the 8 and 9 really are more like 6 and 7 seeds, and they're the ones who should be playing against the 3 and the 4, but you're not. You're going to end up playing the 1 and the 2, and because I would have Ohio State at 4. Like I would have them at number 4 in my rankings. I would have Tennessee at 5 or 6. They're instead going to be 8 or 9, and that's
the problem is your scenario though would continue to devalue conference championship weekend, and they won't allow that.
I'm
not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just saying they're not going to allow for conference championship to have any further diminished stakes.
So let's say Texas loses and they're number 5.
Okay. So they catch the 12.
They're going to beat the 12, and then they're going to be a 2.5 touchdown favorite over the 4 seed. Like that's going to make for some weird stuff. Now this gets right into like, I hate the fact that we seed based how we seed. The reward for teams is the automatic bid. We are giving a conference a reward, G5, ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, with the automatic bid. You shouldn't then give them another reward
for the conference championship.
Yeah, you shouldn't then give them another reward by moving them up 12 spots in the rankings to 3 and 4. You should give. So
you're saying you want the 4 top seeds to be awarded by a full resume meritocracy at the very end.
Well, as much as we can meritocracy, right? Like the NCAA tournament does this every year.
Why they're afraid of that?
The NCAA.
Why do you know why? Why do you think they're afraid of that? Because your system's right, but why do you think they're afraid of that?
I just want to clarify what I'm saying to people. The NCAA tournament, you get into the 68-team field based on automatics and at-larges. Then it doesn't matter how you got in. You are seeded 1 to 68. That's what the tournament should be in football. It should be seeded 1 through 12. Now, go ahead.
If you were to break off the qualification part of the seeding system, in other words, it's going to be what do they say? We're going to take the 5 highest-rated conference champions, and 4 of them are going to receive a bye. It guarantees that you don't have multiple teams from the same conference getting a bye. That's what they're afraid of.
But that's dumb. Anyway, that's my analysis.
They're not going to allow it.
That's my analysis. Dumb.
They're not going to allow it. This year it would hurt the SEC, to be honest.
What do you mean hurt? Like to me, the
you
top
would hand more Big Ten teams buys.
Well, but I think their rankings are wrong. But that's my point. I think it's Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and I think the best 4 teams are Oregon, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State. I think those are the 4 best teams. That's my opinion. And those would be my top 4 in my rankings. And if I was a committee of 1, those are the 4 teams that would get a bye. And then you'd have a bunch of great games. Notre Dame, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, SMU. You'd have a bunch of great games. But I want the 4 best teams to get the bye week. Anyway. Georgia and Texas, you got a winner. Can Texas get revenge?
I think
Texas does as well. We'll break it down a little bit more later. You didn't want to have this conversation, but I find it to be interesting. If you had to, I'm going to ask you like rapid fire questions here.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to play Alabama, Ole Miss, or South Carolina in a playoff game right now today, neutral field, let's say, for the sake of the discussion, a parking lot in Arlington, hypothetically. Which one, rank them in order with which you would want to play them?
That would depend on what kind of team I was.
Let's say you're Ohio State. Let's say you're Tennessee. Let's say you're Notre Dame, Penn State. All built very similarly, right?
I think they win against all 3. And
Tennessee would not.
I like I like how Tennessee's, in a very recent. I like what they're doing as of this moment, as of this week. And this has been that kind of season where it's like, how hot are you at this moment?
I mean, prevailing wisdom is that South Carolina is the hottest team. You don't want to play South Carolina.
I don't believe that. I just think that they're the most exciting team right now.
I do think that Lenore Sellers got faster this year.
I don't really care about the Alabama thing. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not.
What do you mean?
That they're the one of the three that got in or whatever. Like,
I think they're the one I trust the most, but I think Ole Miss might be the best. But I think South Carolina is playing the best football right now.
I don't think Ole Miss's offense is the best lately.
I think you can make a case for all three of them to be there, though.
I didn't look at the Egg Bowl and be like, oh man, this team's going to be robbed. I was like, this team's kind of petering out in a lot of ways.
They said
that offense really struggled.
The committee last year said that form kind of matters. I think it was their way of like shoehorning the Jordan Travis argument into their conversation.
No doubt.
Because I don't think form matters in which you are in my mind, it should not matter if you are being graded on the merit of your entire body of work. Like you can't really say like, oh, well, they've been great. They lost 3 games early, but they've been great the last 6. Like you can't really do that if you're grading on what you accomplished on the whole. I think an injury is different. I think losing your star quarterback is different, but
we would, and knock on wood, we don't have that, but we're only going to encounter that now if it was a conference championship game loser, more than likely. And I
hope we don't.
I don't think that they would do that. I don't think they're going to repeat that mistake. If you had the quarterback at Texas go down, it wouldn't matter as much.
No, it would have to be. It
would have to be Carson Beck.
It would have to be like SMU or Carson Beck. Yeah.
It would be if like Carson Beck goes down and he is done for the year.
Yeah,
and they lose
badly.
And they
still don't think they.
And then they would get booted out of 12.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
I don't think Georgia should fall past like 7 or 8. So
maybe Warren. Maybe you can create the scenario with Warren because I do think Oregon's going to win. Maybe with Warren. Maybe if I'm picking.
You're talking about Tyler Warren?
Yeah,
the tight end for Penn State.
No. Sorry, I was thinking about Tyler Warren because I'm sorry.
He's a great player.
No. I made a joke earlier about how James Franklin only talks about his tight end. Sorry. It's true. It's bizarre.
Right, no, Ryan Day,
Drew Aller. Sorry, not Tyler Warren. Drew Aller, other white name. Kotelek. Yeah, I have also not for the show been deeply suspicious of the Koteleki offense at Penn State this year.
Yeah, it's been weird.
Oh, that's a good one. Wait. When Josh says they dropped to Boise in the 12 seed. If JT they dropped to the 12 seed. Oh, definitely they dropped him to the 12 seed, and they would have to keep him in. You're right, Josh. They absolutely would. Yep. And I do think that's, by the way,
they might be the 12 anyway.
If you're if you're a fan of the SEC of an SEC team going to the playoff, I don't know.
Rooting against Clemson hard.
No, I just say watch out for. I think there might be an upset in the Mountain West. I picked Boise. I don't feel good about it.
I like UNLV to play very well in that game. Barry Odom, former SEC guy, knows what he's doing. Almost beat this team a couple of weeks ago. When when a team gets close to pulling a major upset against a superstar, they generally come back and play very well in the next meeting. And I would not be surprised if UNLV wins that game. UNLV then would automatically be the 12 seed, in which case the only thing that matters for the SEC is Clemson. If Clemson wins, I think SMU stays in the tournament and Clemson steals the Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina slot, which right now appears to be Alabama, which is taking a 3-loss slot and giving it to a worse 3-loss team.
I don't want to hear about that for so many different reasons, but I do think it's funny that for whatever reason Clemson and Alabama are just chained to fate together.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be it might be like Clemson at Notre Dame, which is something we've seen so many times in the last 5 years.
I covered that game in Clemson one time. It was very good.
Some of them have been very good. I have no desire to see it this time.
It would be ugly because I think Notre Dame's defense would swallow them whole like a snake.
And for the first time ever, somebody already said something about in the comments about how Alabama is going to get in, or somebody said it to me on Twitter on the thread, which is Alabama's only going to get in because of TV ratings. And it's like, no, they got in because their wins were better, their resume was better, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think they are necessarily better than Ole Miss or South Carolina. Right. Personally, if I was rooting for one to get in, I want to see Ole Miss get in.
If it was between Alabama and Central Florida or something like that, yeah, I'd be like, okay, the committee's doing their thing, but that's the valuation on those SEC matchups. Alabama is technically the larger fan base, but I'm the first one to take the shot at the worldwide leader. I don't think that's consideration right now.
No. And they also,
they already have ratings stacked up. It doesn't.
Yeah.
They're not trying to do that.
They don't care about Alabama or Clemson. They want Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State to play a bunch of games because they have huge fan
They
bases.
want Texas. I mean, they're very, very, very happy about Texas.
They want
very
Texas
happy.
and Ohio State.
Georgia too.
Texas/Ohio State, Penn State to go as deep as they can. That's what they want.
And I mean, Georgia, the reliability of Georgia in the market has been really good for them as like a TV product. So like they're very happy because it's as much of a diversified from a DMA standpoint as like you could get. I mean, USC's 500, so like
you get Oregon though. You get Oregon.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's not bad. It's not horrible at all. It's not homogenous or regionalized.
The biggest myth about this is why Jim Delaney, former Big Ten commissioner, was the genius that he was. He signed the first cable deal ever with ESPN, and it's because there are more people in the Chicago market than there are in most SEC states.
Mm-hmm.
And so Indiana will do good TV ratings. If it's a good game, because the Big Ten has so many people. The Big Ten is more valuable to ESPN than the SEC is, and people don't realize that.
If you go to Wrigleyville, around the Cubs stadium in the fall, every bar flips from Cubs pregame to this is the Iowa bar, this is the Michigan State bar, this is that. So,
all right. You good to go, man? Otherwise, I know we didn't get into the games much.
We'll see you Sunday. We get to talk about the games on Sunday because we're going to be here.
We'll talk about the
selection.
We'll talk about the rankings and the playoff, and we'll talk about the matchups, and we'll talk about the games, and we'll talk about Georgia and Alabama. Georgia and Texas.
I hope we are talking about Ohio State versus Tennessee in the first round because I think that's going to be an amazing game.
I would love Tennessee at Penn State, Tennessee at Notre Dame, Tennessee at Ohio State. Any of those three would be awesome.
You know what? I think one of those three is, one of those three is definitely happening, I feel like.
Personally, I think Tennessee loses to Ohio State.
Yes.
I think Tennessee beats Penn State or Notre Dame. But middle
Notre Dame, Penn State, yes.
The one I want is Penn State because of the James Franklin history in the Tennessee. I want James Franklin. I want Penn State. And plus, let's be honest, that orange against that navy blue at Happy Valley, great helmet game, great contrast in uniforms. Fantastic. So, all right.
Deeply similar cult-like structures in the fan bases.
No question. They both love Greg Schiano.
Oh, yeah. We could bond over that.
The Greg Schiano Bowl. All right. That's enough of this. For Steven, I'm Braden. Go check out all of his work, of course, all over the place. ML Rose is our great and amazing partner and sponsor. Go eat there. I am Braden Gall. Thanks for hanging out, of course. And we'll talk to you on Sunday with a rankings recap, playoff preview, championship recap, all that good stuff. We'll talk to you then. For Steven, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening, everybody. Peace and love.